Alrighty. So we are now beginning to get into the deep end. And what do I mean by this? Well, um, right now I have changed things around a little bit. So we've got it over here that we've got the standard behavior of where I can detect if I've hit the wall. And when I make such a detection, I'm definitely able to send that message up to the level script from before, right? So my script for my character is able to report to the level that I'm bumping into the walls and keeping track of that. But the question is now, like, what do I do about these enemy guys? Um, let's talk about differentiating hits against enemies over here. And actually, let's take a look at this behavior a little bit more in detail. I have it so that when I hit these enemies a sufficient number of times, they're actually disappearing. So, what is necessary to actually make this happen, right? What do I need to do to make this happen? Well, the first thing, let's go back and take a look at this one more time, because I do think that um, I think it's helpful to see. So notice that when I run into the wall over and over and over again like this, right? So I've got 117 hits so far. I'm hitting that wall 117 times, and that's not changing. However, when I hit this guy 10 times, he does disappear. And similar with this guy, when I hit him 10 times, he changes. Um, let's go back and take another look, just as observations of what's going on and beginning to think about what's happening here. When I hit this element over on the side, uh, this guy, my enemy, is what I'm calling him. I change color. So if you remember my script from before, I was only changing color when I hit an object in level 3 or in layer 3. And I would argue right now that these enemies, these enemy characters who I'm defeating and who are also changing my color are also in level layer 3. So it's not just a layer thing that's going on here, right? There's something where I can assign this guy to a layer. I can have him set to a layer, but he has some additional properties that are going to allow him to um, keep track of things in various ways. So here we go. So we're going back over here. Um, students of the observant students will have noticed that when I hit this guy on the wall, I'm getting a log for sure. But when I go ahead and I hit my enemy over here, we're getting something a little bit different. So that registered as a number 2, but this said damage. So what's happening here is clearly somebody else is getting a message like, hey, damage is happening. And so I gave another bulk and this guy says damage again. So where is this damage coming from? And if we think about who's reporting the damage and ask yourself, is it these walls that's reporting the damage? Probably not. Well, we can go in and actually kind of verify this. Let's go here. So if I go back and look at my, I need to stop that so my mouse comes back to life. If I look at my level script, my level, yeah, my level script, this is exactly the same as before. So I'm extending the node. I get some hit count, sure. Um, so it's someplace else. And if we take a closer look to this, um, you can see I've got these enemies over here. So my enemies have a lot of stuff going on inside of here. This is going to take a little bit of unpacking, and that kind of begins to be the discussion of what we're talking about right now. So what are we talking about right now? We are going to be talking about three things. We're going to be talking about groups. We are going to be talking about putting these things as prefabs, and we are going to be talking about having additional scripts on that sort of per enemy level behavior. So here we go. So this enemy is going to be a prefab. This enemy is a prefab, right? And if I look at him and I double clicked on him, he's simply just a red box. And note that when I created my enemy over here, My enemy was created at like 0, 0, like he doesn't have any offset associated with him just yet. Maybe I could kind of boost him up above the ground so that I didn't need to in my other screen. That probably wouldn't be the worst thing to have. But then I would just have to make sure that everything's it. I also in my prefabs, it's 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 not really it's a good idea when you're naming things to have the script associated with your prefab in the same folder. So here's my enemy scene. This is a rigid body 3D. Let's go back to the inspector. It's a rigid body 3D. He's got his Godot script. He's got his mesh instance 3D, and he's got his collision shape 3D over here. He is of layer 3, as we sort of expected, and if he gets struck by things in layer 2 or layer 1, he'll raise the event. But really, the code is being handled, not it's being triggered not by this being masked to layer 1. My script events are really being they're really a function of my character script having that override, and that's the one that kind of receives these messages here. There's a lot of nonsense in that output screen right now as I move these projects back and forth between computers. Okie dokie. So, where was I? My enemy script. There's that damage. That's the thing we're looking at. So this just extends node. Like, sure, I could have had it extend from rigid body 3D if I wanted to get some more specific functionality. And I'm assuming that I probably would as time goes along to make it a little bit more proper. He's got a base health. Maybe calling it base health would be better. And I have a public method over here, and then notice without the underscore, it's public or treated as public. It's going to be taking damage. So what happens is I take the damage, I set my health minus equal to 1. If this health goes down to 0, I queue free. And I think this was shown in a couple other cases, but it's if you haven't seen it so far, queue free when called on a rigid body or a collider actually takes this element straight off of the it takes it out of the hierarchy, but it only does it in that instance of the game. Don't worry, it's not going to permanently remove it, right? So that's something that people sometimes ask and get a little bit nervous about. So take damage is the question. So how are we calling get damage? Well, before we get into that exactly, let's go over and look at the enemy prefab. So this is basically created right by putting this enemy in with an instantiating of a child scene. That's how I got these guys inside of there. So I added my enemies by instantiating a child scene. And over here in the node menu, I added him to a scene group name known as enemies. So we have this group. So you have signals and groups. And so for my groups, I added him to enemies. This element is not a member of enemies. Enemies is something that does not show up by default, right? So I can go into my groups and I can filter the groups and I can add a new groups. So I could add, I don't know, like bugs. Um, I could add another thing, and now he is a member of bugs unless he's unchecked. So here, this enemy is a member of enemies. Enemy 2 is a member of enemies. The camera is not a member of enemies. You can programmatically control this in the way that you can programmatically control everything else within the page. And then similarly, I've got wall bodies down here, and these are not members of enemies either, significantly, right? So the issue here is the group, and hopefully you recognize this symbol as saying, okay, I'm part of a group. I'm part of a group. And the identification of that as a member of the group is happening then down here in my collider over here. So this collider, I'm saying if the collider is in the group enemies. So this is a really fast way of checking to see if the thing that we have hit, right? So we've got over here. So I'm iterating for when this thing that I'm moving here, my character, when he's moving through, I move and slide. So I do this movement first, and that automatically moves the character. But if in the course of that movement there was a collision, then the velocity is going to be different, which is why I grabbed my entry velocity, and they're going to be collisions. So I go through and I iterate through all of these collisions, and I could have hit two things on that time. You don't really know. I get the collision of I. I say, who's my collider over here? I get the normal of that collision, which is to say, I find the direction from that collision's perspective. Here, this is pulled out a little bit. I check and see if he's layer three, and you'll recall that this is basically doing that bit shift, right? So it's taking the number 0, 0, 1, and it's bit shifting it over two to create the layer mask of 1, 0, 0. And it's saying if something with bit mask 1, 0, 0, which is to say, uh, like decimal four, but also layer three, um, something who is a three triggers on that, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bounce off of him. So if he's in that collision layer, I'm getting that bounce, and this is where I'm controlling the damping. I set a new albedo color, maybe not the best way to create these new colors every single time. I agree that that's not best. Here I am back at my dollar sign. So I'm going through and I'm changing the material override of this guy who's still named box one over there. And then I'm updating the score. So updating the score was how I was seeing that 1, 2, 3 in output. And then finally, I asked the question, hey, are you in the group of enemies? And if you are in the group of enemies, I'm telling you to take damage. Now, this is very interesting because you're going to see right here that this collider, this is just a var, right? It's getting that collider. This should make a interesting suggestion of what type of data this collider actually is. This collider is going to be something that inherits from a body, whether it can be a character body, a static body, a rigid body, um, something that body 3D. That's what this collider is. And because it's the actual instance of this enemy, right? It's the actual instance of this enemy where I can tell the instance of that enemy that I hit to take damage. And so here, enemy one, enemy two, you can do things later on, like assign these enemies individual IDs if you want to know one versus the other. And if you want to know one versus the other about these enemies, that seems to be like a great place to start adding in either parameters inside of here, right? So I can start exporting parameters that maybe are associated with individual IDs, or I can have some sort of global system that keeps track of these guys. Here I'm printing damage, but this could be catered to that individual enemy. And if I want to instantiate these enemies with different types of values, I can access them programmatically to, excuse me, to do that kind of stuff too. So um, as a one final verification over here, and I'd encourage you to kind of go back and take a look at all this stuff. So I'm gonna go back into my level scene over here and take a look at this guy 3D again. I don't know why Godot is frozen, which is a little bit weird, buddy. You want to start playing? So this is not going to play one last time for me, which is kind of unfortunate. It seems like I've done something wild in my computer's perspective, and I'm not really sure what that wild thing is, but it is definitely not happy. What I was hoping to show you is that just as well, I could have given this wall a group, and should that wall have had a group, this is completely unresponsive. Maybe a save is what you wanted? No. Well, if this wall is also in that particular group of enemies, that would also make it take on damage as well. I'm going to stop this video here. I think that that gets the point across, and I have a feeling that this is Zoom taking over my computer and not allowing me to interact with this project the way I need to. But that's where we are. Thank you for watching.